Okay, so um, why destroy all the world? I mean, if God is so disgusted with humanity, why is he destroying um, the animals and the plants who didn't deserve, I mean, didn't do anything bad? So, um,
It
not to
seems to
mention,
track
not to
all of
mention
the.
the newborn babies who didn't have time to destroy, to sin.
It seems like all of the creatures made out of the Adamah, out of the dirt, were wiped out. Something having to do with land. All of the creatures that were not made out of the Adamah, or at least in the second creation story, when God creates all of the creatures of the earth and the birds and everything out of the earth. And
Yeah, so look, well, um, but it doesn't say, I mean, he's, it seems that the fowl and the fish, well, okay, maybe not the fish.
yeah, the fish were swarmed.
Yeah, we wouldn't, yeah. But the fowl
So
was destroyed as well, right? He's obviously, he's got the crow and he's got birds in the ark. And the birds cannot survive during the flood and the time after. But
it
also,
seems
look,
like
but even, okay, let's say, because it does say if you see verse in chapter 6, 12.
6:12.
Yeah. Okay. So God saw that the land and that all, in Hebrew, all that is flesh has corrupted its way on the earth. Okay? So, fine, let's say the entire animal kingdom. Okay? Why destroy the earth? You know, the plants and everything else. I mean, obviously God can destroy what he wants. And again, and this doesn't even take into account the newborn babies who clearly have not yet corrupted their ways.
It seems like creatures made from the earth, or these terrestrial creatures, like always don't quite get it right. Like when God makes a helper out of the animals, for like none of them are an adequate helper for Adam.
Yeah.
And Adam, it wasn't good for him to be alone. Like he wasn't quite right and needed everything was a little bit off with the terrestrial creatures. It seems. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas the same description isn't given of the creatures of the sea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, those were not brought in to be companions for Adam. But again, like it's not some sort of original flaw in the terrestrial creatures. And again, you know, our method is to take the author at his word. Okay, so all that is flesh. So let's take him. Let's not look at it as because look, he's complaining about humanity. Um, you know, it's actually, even if you look at verse 5 onward, God saw that man's evil on the land was terrible, and all his thoughts of his hearts were evil all day. And God regretted that he made Adam, made mankind, and was saddened to his heart. And God says, I will wipe off man, which I have created, from the face of the earth. From man to beast to insect to the fowl of the sky, because I regret having made them. Okay, so his complaint is about man, and yet he's wiping, and look, and his complaint is obviously about
Wickedness and violence.
about wickedness, exactly. Clearly, that is exclusively a human fault, as we discussed in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so I mean, and again, just our method is to follow the author, and the author is telling us, this is us. This is not conjecture. The author is telling us that the complaint is about man, and that God wants to wipe out man, and therefore I will wipe out man to beast to insect to fowl.
So the wickedness of man seems to have to do with violence. Is that fair? I mean, because we have the knowledge of good and evil, but there's still a disobedience before that knowledge.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that counts as wickedness or not, that pre-knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah. So
disobedience.
Yeah. So it doesn't say that. I mean, it doesn't say violence, although we can.
No, that's what I'm assuming. And
Yeah.
so the animal kingdom is violent.
Yes. The animal kingdom is violent.
I was trying to figure out how the animals could have been blameworthy.
Maybe look, it's not. I really don't have an answer. I don't even have a speculation. So it's odd, because the complaint is on A, and so you're right. Maybe it is. I don't want to see violence, and therefore, basically, I will destroy all living creatures, except for the sea. But there's
I don't think that would have been difficult to see if you went fishing with other fish.
Sorry. The audio cut out.
No, it would seem to me that would disprove my point, because the fish are just as violent as any of the animals on the land.
Yeah. No, that's what. Yeah, I'm saying the same thing. If it is violence, then you should destroy the fish as well. Yeah, just leave the plants. Yeah. So I really don't. It's if you follow our method of following the author and not injecting anything beyond, it's odd. Okay, but look, maybe it's to show Noah that he can, just to demonstrate what awesome power he has, should he choose to use it. But again, it doesn't say so, but who knows, maybe. But again, we have nothing to go by except to notice this incongruity between what bothers God and what he does. One thing to keep in mind, though, on this is that we just finished a story about a man like you and me, Cain, who tried to understand seeming injustice in the world. Again, so if you're thinking, what did the babies do? What did the animals do? What did the birds do that the fish don't? And so just like we're now looking at seeming injustice, and just like everybody every day sees injustice in the world, we just finished reading a story exactly about that. And again, this is a central problem that every religion has to address, this issue of theodicy. So whether it's Cain or Job or a number of stories in between. And so we were just told in the Cain story to resist the impulse to try to understand God, to try to resist judging the morality of God's actions or inactions. And we were told, we're told in Cain, we're told in Job, that God is not going to sit in the defendant's box for us. He's not going to explain himself to us because we don't have the perspective or don't have the tools to understand or judge God's justice, and that we're going to go mad, as Cain did, if we try. So maybe this is a test. If you were you listening to the previous story, and so just move on. But again, like I said, I don't have a story. It's just odd. But one thing to notice here in God's decision that he's had up to here is that in the Cain story, we saw a murderer get away with murder, with God himself making it happen. God prohibiting capital punishment and offering Cain special protection. And then the result of that was a worse murder. And again, him getting away with murder. And whereas here we see God administering capital punishment himself to all of humanity. And after, as we'll talk today, after administering this capital punishment himself, God gives Noah's family, or gives us, new laws, including mandating capital punishment for murderers. Okay, so it's like this. God goes back on his prohibition on capital punishment in the biggest way possible. And it's like, okay, everyone gets capital punishment, and then from now on, a new regime regarding capital punishment. So, okay, so we'll get to that, to the new capital punishment law in a second, after the first new law, and that is the carnivorous diet. So,
can I ask? So the capital punishment and the carnivorous diet, they both also seem to have to do with some kind of violence or killing. Is that the common thread that weaves the wickedness into this solution of reordering what's okay to kill and what isn't?
So again, God doesn't explain. Okay, God doesn't tell Noah because this. Like he doesn't. He explains the new law. He explains the capital punishment law, not the dietary law. But he doesn't tell us why the change of heart. If we follow the, it seems to me, again, just if this were a modern book, okay, forget God, forget that this is a theological book. If this were a modern book, then the sequence of events suggests that this is some sort of educational program, to your point, okay, because the complaint earlier was about violence, wickedness, immorality. God is starting anew here, and clearly starting with a new program. The first program failed. This is a new program, it seems. So if this were a modern book, and if we have a certain idea about God and consistency, which is troublesome. If you think of this, as I just described it, as a new program, then it introduces a certain problem about God, which we'll hopefully get today. But yeah, I read it the same way as you do. That there's clearly something here to address the central problem that made God destroy humanity in the first place. So let's start with the diet first. So what's up with God changing the diet from vegetarian to carnivorous? I mean, again, speaking of consistency, if vegetarianism was good for us before the flood, why is it bad after the flood? Okay, what does it signify? I mean, it's clearly purposeful, okay, and it's pretty meaningful. So what function does it seem to serve, since God doesn't explain?
Is it possible that it satiates a bloodlust in human beings that that human beings were exercising on each other by focusing it as opposed on each other toward the animals?
Right. So I think that is there are two traditional explanations for this new law. One is exactly what you said, that it's a pragmatic concession. So God now understands humankind better. He understands that they're violent and have this bloodlust. And so this is a pragmatic concession to humans' natural lust for violence. Okay, so since they're so attached to violence and killing, as witnessed by the moral decline from Adam to Cain to Lamech to Noah's generation, then exactly what you said, let them direct it towards animals rather than towards their fellow humans, which are more elevated creatures. So that's one explanation. The other explanation is that it has to do with the post-flood condition of the earth. Okay, that Noah's family encountered a barren world without plants. Okay, so they're allowed to eat animals, because otherwise they'll starve. Okay, that's, to me, that's the weaker of the two traditional explanations, because, I mean, it's reasonable, but it's completely meaningless. Okay, because this condition of having no agriculture, no plants, is true for only a year or two. Okay, after that,
during that year, like, wouldn't the animals need to eat something? And if they're not eating, like, there has to be some herbivores that the carnivores are eating, and if they couldn't exist for a year without.
Yeah, that's true. That's that's obviously not explained. Look, we're also forced to live with the assumption, based on the dietary law from chapter 1, that the lions and the coyotes and the wolves all ate a vegetarian diet. Because it says in chapter 1 that all the greenery shall be for you, for all of you, for man and the animals. Okay, so these are things that are unclear, and you're right. What did the deer eat for the first year after the flood? So, to me, this explanation about the barren earth is meaningless because it's a temporary issue, whereas this is a permanent law. So, again, the reigning explanation is either a concession to humans' lust for violence or their lust for meat. Okay, so based on your, I mean, how do you evaluate? I mean, for me, it doesn't ring particularly convincing, because from what we know about God, He's not. He doesn't make a lot of practical concessions for human desires and vices. Like, He's not letting us have adultery only with a small number of women rather than all the women we want, for example. So to me, it just doesn't sound like our, the Bible's God. How about you? Does it? When you suggested this, are you ambivalent about it, or?
I found it, if it is the explanation, I think it's very troubling insofar as if life in Eden was good, or if it represented a pinnacle, and there was never a concession in this. It was never good to eat meat. And we see that this bloodlust, or what caused this wickedness, a concession to the wickedness is troubling to me, if that's what's happening.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right that you're, instead of combating this vice, let's call it, you're permitting it, encouraging it within a channel. Okay, but also it's unclear why. Look, clearly, we all like steak better than we do lima beans, but why would that move God 1 inch? Okay, or we're violent creatures. We like violence rather than peaceful living. Why would that influence? Well, why would God bend His will to ours? I mean, again, we just don't have a good record of that, of God doing that elsewhere. Okay, not to mention, if God was going to start making concessions to our various vices, I think we'd all prefer the vice, for Him to permit us some stealing, some adultery, etc., rather than a carnivorous diet. I mean, it seems, I guess. So, so it's a sensible explanation, but it's troubling, number one, and it's speculative. Okay, and because clearly the Bible doesn't tell us why this shift happens. We're supposed to solve this puzzle ourselves, but like you said, this idea that God is giving into human desire, either for violence or for meat, isn't satisfying. It just doesn't sound like the God that's been introduced to us so far. And as we will get to know him even better later on. So the other possibility, which is also in traditional commentaries, or commentaries from the past, is that maybe it's not a practical concession at all, but instead a reward that humans have earned through Noah's righteousness, through his efforts, through his fidelity to God. So because Noah saved the animals, he is now their master. Okay, just like, if you think of ancient slavery, okay, when a warrior in the ancient world captured an enemy soldier and chose not to kill him, that captive became his slave. Okay, because the captured person literally owes his life, his body, his labor, to his captor who kept him alive. He could have killed him, he kept him alive, and now so you now belong to your captor. Okay, so so perhaps following this logic, Noah and you and I, his progeny, were now allowed to, because we, humanity, saved the animals, they now belong to us to do as we please. We can kill them, we can enslave them, meaning we can own them and use their labor, or we can do whatever else we want. Okay, because all the animals owe their existence to Noah, and through him to us humans. Okay, so these are the two solutions that are these two explanations, either a practical concession to humanity or a reward to humanity. They both make sense, but what's common to both, they both ignore the other sudden innovation from God following the flood. Because God not only gives a new dietary law, but also a new criminal law on the issue of capital punishment for murderers. Actually, and it's if you noticed, God demands capital punishment for anyone, animal or human, that kills a human being. Okay? So people who kill people and animals who kill people are also bound for death. And later in Leviticus, there's a law that says that if an ox gores a person, that ox shall be killed. Okay? Even though he's just a dumb animal acting out of animal impulse. Okay? And so you can explain it as we do today, like we put down dogs that attack people because they're dangerous for the future, but there's also a moral component to it here in the new law that God gives Noah, in that the human life is sacred, and therefore anyone who sheds human blood is fit for death. Okay. So the two explanations that we just discussed for the dietary law looks at these two innovations as separate puzzles for us to solve separately. Okay, so when you look at the commentators of old, they kind of ask, why the new dietary law? And gave various explanations for it. And then they looked at the other puzzle, why the innovation on capital punishment. Okay, but these are two separate issues that are addressed separately. So do me a favor, if you could skip over to Genesis 9, the beginning of 9, 1 through 6. Where is it? Yeah. Okay, this is the, after the flood, they come down and God blesses them.
You want me to read?
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, because let me hear what your translation has, how your translation has it.
God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fertile and increase and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you shall be upon the beasts of the earth and upon the birds of the sky, everything with which the earth is astir, and upon all the fish of the sea."
Yeah, in my text it has anything that crawls or creeps on the ground. So basically, animal, beast, fowl, and insects, and all the fish in the sea. Okay.
And it has a creature that lives shall be yours to eat, as with grasses. I give all.
Hey, the connection is bad. Your voice is kind of. It's as if your voice is pixelated. Yeah. So in 9:1-6, so he blesses Noah's family, and says, "Your the beast of the land and the fowl and all the creatures, the fish, the insects, will fear and dread you." Okay, and they will all be to you to eat as the green grass that I gave to you before. However, do not eat the flesh with the blood. Okay, how does it translate verse 5 and 6 for you?
But for your own lifeblood I will require a reckoning. I will require it of every beast, of man too. Will I require a reckoning for human life of every man, for that is his fellow man.
Yeah. Wait, that's how verse 6 is translated, what you just read?
That was 5, and then
okay.
6 is, whoever sheds the blood of man, a man shall his blood be shed, for in his image did God make man.
Yeah, good. Because in God's image, the man was made in God's image. So in Hebrew it sounds nice. There's a kind of it says, blood in Hebrew is dam, and Adam, or man, is Adam, Adam. So, shofech dam ha'adam be'adam damo yishafech. That just sounds just nice. So it certainly seems that, so like I said, the two innovations are treated by commentators separately. Okay, let's solve the vegetarianism problem, and then let's solve the capital punishment problem. But it seems from these verses in chapter 9 that God actually connects these two innovations. Okay, this section is one, these verses that connect, especially verse 3, 3 and 4, 3, 4, and 5. Introduce all of them, both innovations, both what you can eat and the fact that you cannot kill a human being. Okay, so the author, God, doesn't treat these as two separate new laws, but rather as one whole. Okay, it's not here are new dietary laws and also a new law about capital punishment. Okay, So if God sees them as related to one another, as part of one thing, and if the biblical author does the same, then we should not, we shouldn't artificially separate them. We should contemplate how the two innovations relate to one another. So now, obviously, we understand. We just finished Cain, the mark of Cain. So we understand the innovation of the carnivorous diet based on what we read in Genesis 1, and we understand the innovation of capital punishment based on what we read with regard to Cain. So, going back to what you said at the beginning, what's how do you see the connection, or how does God see the connection between the new diet and the new law with regard to murder?
It just the only way I can reconcile it is this whole idea of this that they both have to do with bloodlust, that they have to do with violence, and redirecting violence in not toward disincentivizing violence between man and man, and conceding violence to animals.
Yeah. Well, but then we're still with that.
Right, we're still with that.
With the problem to identify with this idea of God conceding to our vices. Okay. What's the how do so I can see, so the two laws work together because both of them do the same thing. Okay, so you can, although technically, look, when we kill each other, like there's no suggestion in the previous chapters about human violence and wickedness about a desire to eat flesh. Okay. So if it really is simply a matter of violence, then say, okay, if you want to kill stuff, kill animals. Why this, it seems like some sort of a gift, here you can also have better food. Okay? Why not just, if it is about restraining or channeling violence, why not again clarify that animals are appropriate for killing, people are not? Go at it. You don't need a carnivorous diet to address the violence of man. Okay, so
so the connection between I guess violence and food is it a necessary connection? I was just saying that when I watch my cat seems to be violent in play and be violent for food.
Right.
I don't know if that's necessary.
Yeah, so again, if God is trying to solve the problem or to channel our violent instincts, look, there was no complaint. The Bible doesn't tell us that people were eating meat surreptitiously, kind of criminally eating meat, and therefore God sees need to concede to that. It tells us that they were murdering people, or being violent and wicked, etc., etc. And so, fine, I can accept the capital punishment as a concession to that, but why let us eat steak? So, to me, it seems that the two laws, what we just read is a declaration from God that people are allowed to kill and eat and use for their pleasure any living thing. Okay? Beforehand, it was just plants, but now any living thing, plant or animal, they can kill and treat like plants. Okay? Use for their purposes. But nobody is allowed to kill a human being. Okay? So people can kill anything and eat anything, but nobody is allowed to kill and eat people. Okay? And those who do this will be put to death. Okay? So it establishes a clear hierarchy. Okay? But the carnivorous diet and the capital punishment law is a declaration about a hierarchy between man and beast, or man and animal. Okay? And if you remember, in the second creation story, humans and animals lived similar lives. Okay? They were naked, they were vegetarian, they communed with one another. Okay? Man and the animals were together. Okay? They were even seen as potentially fit companions for one another. Okay? In the first creation story, God makes explicit this similarity between humans and animals, or this association between humans and animals by saying that humans, like the animals, shall eat plants. And if you remember, they were created on the same day. Yeah, they were created on the same day, they eat the same thing. But then the first murder takes place. And God's response to this terrible act is to give Cain a slap on the wrist, as we see it. Okay? And to outlaw capital punishment. Okay? So whatever instinct human beings had to punish this violence with equal violence, God outlaws that, clarifying to people that it's wrong for humans to shed one another's blood, even as punishment for murder. Okay, so God originally gave humans two laws. One was the vegetarian diet, and the other was the prohibition on capital punishment. And the result is what we've seen. Okay, the result was worse than even when there was no law at all. Okay, by the time of Lemech, by the time of Noah, murder and mayhem had become a staple among people. Okay, so following the flood, again, God is starting. This is kind of a new creation moment, a new beginning, and the new beginning. And this is, again, it's not me. It is the biblical author who says this in the beginning of chapter 9. Yeah, so God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, prosper and multiply and fill the earth. Okay, so how do you know that this is? How can you tell that this is a new beginning for humanity?
A new blessing?
Yeah, no, but that this
In
is
their-
that this is kind of a restart, a rebooting, going back to the original creation of of the world.
The earth is empty and it needs to be filled.
Yeah, but no, but again, if I'm telling you that this is a reboot, okay, that the author is trying to tell us that this is God going back to the beginning and redoing what he did with Adam and Eve. Well,
He uses the same language.
Exactly, it's the exact same language. Okay, these are the very same words verbatim that he uses for Adam and Eve. Okay, prosper, multiply, fill the earth. It blesses them and tells them these things. Okay, so the author tells us to compare to compare these two beginnings for some reason, for whatever reason he has. He wants us to compare the beginning, the post-flood beginning, to the beginning in the creation story. Okay, so again, so let's do what the author tells us. Let's compare Genesis 9, 1 through 7, this new beginning, to Genesis 1, 28 to 30. One 28 to 30. Okay. So God blessed them and told them, prosper and multiply. This is Genesis 1. This is to Adam and Eve. Prosper and multiply and fill the earth and conquer it. And what's the word that you have here about the fish of the sea? Govern it?
And the
What is it? Your audio is off. So
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I have rule, R-U-L-E,
Yeah.
and rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Same here for me. And God told them, "Here I gave you all the grass and the seeds on the face of the earth, and all the trees on it, and the fruit of the tree and its seeds to you for eating, and for all the beasts of the land, and all the fowl of the sky, and all the crawlers on the earth, and every living soul shall eat this green grass also." Okay, so compare this to 9:1-7, which everything we read. So basically, after what we read, 1-6, and you prosper and multiply and fill the earth and prosper in it. And God said to Noah and his son, "I am founding my alliance with you, my covenant with you, and with your seed after you." Actually, okay, that's okay. That's it. Yeah. So we already know the diet switches from vegetarian to carnivorous, and God switches from prohibition of capital punishment to demanding it. But what other differences has the author created between these two obviously parallel scenes?
Between man and God, or at least not explicitly stated.
Right.
There's a promise to never again do something, which is different than the first.
Yeah, but I think that's the covenant. Okay, that I will never again do this. The rainbow in the sky. That's the covenant. You know, this will never happen again. That's the alliance. Okay, but specifically with regard to, so if what I was suggesting is that these two laws in combination create a clear hierarchy between man and the animal kingdom.
Oh,
what's the if with an eye to that, how are these two scenes different?
That now the covenant is with man and not with the animals. The animals clearly are above the animal kingdom and rule the animal kingdom.
Right, but again, in one, it also says that you shall rule it doesn't say the beast of the land, but it says that they shall rule the fish and the fowl.
And the fish and the fowl are left out in 9.
Yeah, well, no, in 9 it says basically all living things.
Every living thing, birds, cattle, wild beasts.
And creepy crawlers and everything. Okay, but so technically in 1, when it talks about the rulership of man, it's of the fish of the sea and the... Oh no, I take it back. Sorry. It says, you shall rule the fish of the sea and the fowl of the sky and the beast of the land. And the beast, and in all the land and all the crawling on the land. So I take it back. Okay, so it has man rule all the animals and the land in 1. How about in 9?
It's, in the translation I have, my covenant will be with you and your offspring and with every living thing that is with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast as well. all that have come out of the ark, every living thing on earth.
Yeah, no. But again, that's the covenant about, I won't destroy.
Mhm.
This won't happen again. But the again, if you look at verses 1 through 4, 5, 4, or 1 through 3. Okay. So look, it's the same thing. It says that you shall rule the animal kingdom beforehand, and it says you'll rule the animal kingdom here. But what's the difference between these two? Again, we already identified the difference in the diet and the difference in the killing, in the capital punishment. Okay, that you can kill and eat anything, and nobody is allowed to kill or eat you. Okay, so that's already established. But what else is difference between this rulership and this rulership?
Fear and dread.
Right, exactly. Okay, in the first one, look, the combination of dominion and a vegetarian diet paints a picture, and it's in the tone of the language in chapter 1, that the dominion of man is meant to be benevolent. Okay, like the dominion of man over children or of patrons over their clients. Okay? It's a protectorship of kind of sorts. Okay, and again, we see in chapter 2 how the animals are kind of, again, they turn out to be failures as companions, but they're fitting company for man. They live together, they live similar lives. Okay? But to Noah, there's a clear contrast in the tenor of this description of man's rulership over the animal kingdom, in that God tells them that he will deliver all the animals into their hands, and that fear and dread of humans will be upon all the animals, and that the animals shall be food for humans. Okay, so this is mankind not governing the animals, but conquering them and preying on them. Okay, it's a much more it's a predatory relationship. It's not a ruler ruling over his people or over his wards. This is fear and dread. This is a kind of somebody again preying on the animal kingdom. And I will deliver them to you, and you will eat them and kill them, and it's like slaughterhouse. So what's the meaning of this development? What's the what is the author trying to convey here? Again, if we're correct, and I think we are, that the author is telling us, compare these two stories, these two scenes. Again, he's using the same language, it's the same setting, and doing the same thing. Here's a diet for you, you shall rule them, etc. So if he's telling us to compare the two, and this is one of the differences we're finding, what's the significance of this? Of the second scene, of the change?
Seems to put even more distance between animals and human beings.
Right. If earlier there's the close connection and harmony between humans and animals that you see in the first and especially in the second creation story becomes completely separate and completely hierarchical with Noah. And now man and animal are completely opposed to one another. Okay? When the law against murder is given to Noah, the protection of law applies only to humans. Like I said, humans can kill and eat anything, but nothing, no animal and no human, is allowed to kill or eat humans. Okay? So, look, we already, when we discussed, when we analyzed the two creation stories, that the central message in both of them, separately and together, the repeated message in both creation stories is that you are not an animal. Okay, the the first and second creation stories get there in different ways. The first one has man created in God's image, unlike any of the animals. In the second one, people make themselves. They acquire God's image on their own by eating from the tree. But the end result, the takeaway from both of them, from both stories, is the same. They both tell us that we are not, in fact, like animals. Okay, so don't get tricked by the superficial similarities between people and beasts. Okay, don't be superficial. Don't focus on the similar bodies, similar bodily function. Focus instead on the meaningful difference, and that is, if you remember, we talked about that you are clothed and they are naked. Okay, that's the difference. You have a sense of shame, a sense of right and wrong, and they don't. Actually, in this respect, it's a quiz question from Bible classes. What is the very first human invention?
The loincloth or the leaf?
Yeah, clothing. Okay, in Genesis 3, wherever it is, 3 at the beginning, the very first technology is sewing. Okay, and it kind of points to the fact that the necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, and the most pressing human necessity is clothing. Okay.
Along this track, it seems to fit in that the biblical God clothes them in animal skins.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah, so it doesn't say, but already you see this kind of, again, hierarchy, and that we can use animals. Again, it's part of this thing about you're not an animal. Okay, it's fitting to use animals for your purposes. It's not fitting to use people for your purposes this way, either for food or clothing or as tools or whatever it might be, or to use our bones as tools. Okay. But what you see here in the first human technology, the first problem we needed to solve was our nakedness. Okay. Again, not that we don't need food, obviously. We need food and water like every other animal does. But those needs are pressing for all living creatures, food and water. The pressing need that is uniquely human is clothing, because of that sense of shame, the moral sense that is uniquely human and is the essence of humanity. Okay. So, in any case, that's so the creation stories call on readers to understand that despite appearances, we are not animals. Okay? We're different. We're far above animals. Okay? And here in this new beginning, okay, so that was the first beginning, and this difference was clarified to us then. And you might say it was reinforced in the Cain story, but now in this new beginning, in this replay of the Adam and Eve story, in the Noah story, what the Noah story shows is that God is learning only gradually what these humans that he's created really are. And he learns gradually that humans are violent and murderous. It's probably a combination of reason and free will. Okay, if you're in control of yourself and you're reasonable and you have rational faculties, that's a deadly combination. Even if you know what's morally right and wrong. Because if murder makes rational sense, it doesn't make moral sense. I mean, it's immoral. But of course, if you have X and I want it, me taking it is is a product of my free will and my reason. Okay? Or if I'm angry at you, I will strike you, etc. So, so even if you know morally what's right and wrong, the combination of reason and free will is a deadly one, as God finds out. But if you add moral ignorance into the mix, and again, I'm calling on you to recall Cain's moral ignorance about murder, and Lemech's even greater moral ignorance. Okay, so if you add moral ignorance to reason and free will, then you end up with the kind of appalling society that we see in the Lamech story, and which apparently got even worse after Lamech, which prompted God to do what He did with the flood. Okay? So, so God is learning this as He sees humanity continue, which apparently from what we just read with these new laws, God's second learning experience is that God recognizes that His prohibition of capital punishment was counterproductive. Okay? Not only did it not give humans moral guidance, it gave them immoral guidance. And again, Lemech is, I think that's the purpose of breaking those genealogies with the two sentences about Lemech. Okay? It's to show that Lemech, or humanity, behaved this way because they looked up. Lemech looks up to Cain. Okay? He got the completely wrong message about God's protection for Cain. Okay? So if God avenges Cain sevenfold, He will avenge me 77-fold, because I'm an even bigger murderer. Okay? So God's new deal with Noah's family can be understood as God, again, so if the problem that you see in Cain and Lamech is moral ignorance, partly fueled by God's policy on capital punishment, then we can understand this new covenant, the new laws that God gives Noah's family, as God addressing man's moral ignorance. Okay, the generations between Cain and Noah demonstrated to God that humans truly did not understand their moral. They did not understand that they are their brother's keeper. Okay? Cain says it outright, and Lamech demonstrates it with his actions and his song for himself. Okay, so they clearly don't understand their moral obligations towards one another. And this is the context into which God drops this course reversal. On both of those, He gave us only two laws beforehand, and now He gives us two new laws that are completely the opposite of the first laws. Vegetarianism, carnivorous diet. No capital punishment, demand for capital punishment. Okay? So if just to compare, take a look at God's angry realization in chapter 6. 6. Yeah.
6:5.
Yeah, 6:5 and 6. 6:5 to 7.
I have the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that He made man on the earth, and His heart was saddened. The Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the men whom I've created, men together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I've made them.
Right. Now jump to the scene after the flood, to chapter 8. Chapter 8. (8:21).
So the Lord smelled the
Yeah,
pleasing
actually, wait, 21? 20. Yeah.
then
20 to 20 to 21, that's it.
And then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and he offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the pleasing odor, and the Lord said to himself, never again will I doom the earth because of man, since the devisings of man's mind are evil from his youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living being as I have done.
Right.
So
you see, the first one, the after Lamech, is he recognizes that man's desires of the heart are evil from birth. And it's a very angry, disappointed tone, whereas in 8:21, it's the same recognition. Okay, I will not continue to curse the earth for man because of man, because again it's the same language as he uses in chapter 6 that we just read. Man's heart's desires are evil from youth or from birth. Okay, so he recognizes it, but here in chapter 8, it's God tenderly accepting. It's a tender acceptance of this insight about human nature. The first one, he's angry about it. In the second one, he again, it reads much more tender, okay, and much more accepting of this unfortunate characteristic of human nature. Okay? And so, given that he recognizes that, look, my poor creatures, these human beings that I created, they have this handicap. Okay, they have a rotten heart. What to do? Okay, and so he devises a plan of moral education for these innately immoral beings, or innate or morally ignorant beings. One or the other, doesn't matter. Okay, and he gives them this moral education is the combination of a new diet and a new law about murder. Okay, and this combination establishes and drives home the essential difference between human and animal. Again, the heavy price paid for taking a human life indicates great value for human life, whereas animal life is dirt cheap. Okay? This distinction was less clear in the first creation story, in which again people and animals were created on the same day, on Friday. They eat the same food. And it was less clear in the second creation story even than that, because again, Adam and the animals in the garden were just hanging out, and even possible mates. Eve is talking with snakes. Again, they're all eating the same food. The distinction between man and animal clearly was unclear, evidently, was unclear to Cain. It's unclear to Lamech and to the other wicked people who populated the earth before the flood. Okay? They don't understand that you can't treat people this way, the way that we can treat animals, use animals, hurt animals, kill animals. Okay? So God's laws to Noah, again, tying together a carnivorous diet and capital punishment for murderers, these two laws were, they seem like, again, given the fact that God explicitly connects them, and that both are a reversal from what happened before with Adam, that these two laws were God's method of addressing this dual problem of human violence and and people's moral ignorance, which was on display in Cain, Lamech, etc. Okay, so capital punishment for murderers is God's way of telling humans that, yes, you are your brother's keeper. You didn't know this. Capital punishment, and obviously we know that Lamech learned from the mark of Cain, that no, we're not our brother's keeper. That is God's obvious message in the Cain story. Murder away. Okay, so here with the capital punishment law, God is telling people, you shall be your brother's keeper. Okay? And a carnivorous diet is God's way of helping humans understand, again, viscerally, subconsciously through the stomach, why this is the case. Why we are beholden to one another. Okay, you should be your brother's keeper because you are not animals. Okay, you are again far superior, far elevated above animals. Okay, so it kind of drives home the fact that these are two separate species, two separate entities, which was not as clear before when they ate the same food and everything else. So is this blasphemous to suggest that God is learning things from experience?
God is supposed to be omnipotent, and it is.
Well, maybe he is omnipotent, but he certainly doesn't come off as omniscient.
Or, I guess, it's hard for me to separate those two in my head. I think if you have real powerful, you have to know everything. Anyways, the text doesn't say that, though. The text reads like, I agree that God is learning things.
Yeah. Well, let's look. The text says it, and the text says God regretted something he did. It means that he didn't anticipate the result. It's what basis? Where did we get the idea that God cannot learn new things? That God pre-knows everything, and that he knows the future, and that he knows your heart, and that he knows, again, that he's all-knowing. What basis do we have for that?
We're inclined towards, I have two things in my mind: providence and divine justice, both of which might be problematized. Providence in that there's a plan for human beings that was thought out from the beginning, and that plan is unfolding. And divine justice is because there was a plan, because there was a way that human beings were supposed to be, we can understand and divine justice supports when we're doing good or doing bad.
Right, but look, the idea of providence, you're right, there is a plan. Clearly, there is a plan. What we're seeing, though, is, look, you and I make plans all the time. Okay? And then unexpected consequences emerge, and we correct our plan. Either we don't correct our plan and it fails, or we correct our plan in order to accommodate this new knowledge that we've gained as things unfold, which apparently is how we read this. Okay? God created humanity. It took a very wrong turn, and it seems that God recognizes that the original laws either caused it or at least didn't prevent it. Okay, he sees fit. Well, okay, I won't try to read his mind, but he comes to see a better way, two better laws, to help prevent in the restart for humanity, to prevent what happened in the first start. So you're right about providence. There is a plan, but the idea that the planner knows everything, knows human nature, and knows the future, that is a big, that is, look again, like we already clarified, it's, it's, it kind of clashes with what we see here. But my question is, obviously we see it as blasphemous. Okay, it's an attack on God. Pointing this out, pointing what the author himself or what God himself says. But my question is, based on what do we expect God to be all-knowing? And so you're saying providence, you're right, but providence, I mean, having a plan doesn't suggest that the planner knows everything or knows the nature of what he's dealing with. Okay? So divine justice, I didn't understand so much the how that works.
That it would, divine justice perhaps would, if it's consistent divine justice, an understanding of the nature of what a human being is supposed to be from the very beginning, that is unchanging.
Yeah, it's true.
And
But
then,
yeah,
and then
it's true. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and then punishment would be carried out accordingly, according to that permanent standard that was from the beginning.
Right. So you're right, except that we can see here in these two stories that divine justice is not the same. Okay. So and we know, I didn't even think of it till you said it. So divine justice is not the same. Okay, that God has one plan for us at the beginning, a different plan now, and specifically with regard to the ultimate crime. So it could be that human nature has changed, and therefore different punishment is fitting. But we know that that's not the case, because God finds that man's heart is rotten before the flood, and similarly after the flood. So man is man. Okay. What changes is the policy. So look, this is clearly a problem. What might be the case here is that it might be a problem for us in a way that it wasn't for the original readers of this book. Maybe. Okay, so maybe we've developed certain expectations or certain understanding of God's characteristics that are not in this book, or at least not in Genesis, or not in the Torah, but are later developments, maybe. Okay, and okay, so we'll devote a whole meeting just to this when in the after we deal with the Exodus story, because one of the most troubling things in the Torah is that sentence or the repeated reference to God hardening Pharaoh's heart. Okay, and it brings up it highlights this huge question about God's omniscience and omnipotence. Okay, because the Bible overall speaks in a certain way about God's power, and yet, in any case, so we'll come back to this, but it is a this story, and in general language that shows us God being angry, God being disappointed, God regretting things, it clashes with our understanding of God as all-knowing and all-powerful, and eventually we're going to have to open this up and see, look at these questions more thoroughly. But to just keep this little episode in mind for when we do. Okay, so let's now get to the post-flood, to the rain, the rainbow. If you read 8:18 to 9:17, 8:18. Yeah.
Oh, you want me to read all that?
Yeah, no, don't read it aloud. Just kind of. I know you've read it, but just kind of reread it because I want us to kind of again look at the tone and look at the. Okay, so they're building the.
Ridiculous. It is more. The anger is gone.
Right. That you know, in 21 and 22, God smells the sweet smell, and he tells himself that he won't exact this kind of punishment again. He acknowledges that man's heart is evil, and then he tells this to Noah in chapter 9, in 9 to 17. Okay? I'm establishing my alliance with you and with your seed, and all the living creatures that are with you. I'm establishing my covenant with you, and no longer will all the flesh be destroyed, and no longer will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God says, this is the sign of my covenant, my alliance with you, and all living creatures with you for generations to come, to forever. I give my rainbow in the sky as a sign of my covenant with you, between myself and the earth. Okay, and the rainbow in the sky will appear, and I will remember my covenant, my alliance with you, between me and you, and between all living creatures, and there won't be again a flood to destroy all the flesh, all living beings. And the rainbow in the sky, I shall see it to remind myself, or to remember this forever alliance between God and all living creatures on the land. And God told Noah, this is the sign of the alliance between, again and again, between all flesh upon the earth. And the sons of Noah who came out were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And okay, there. And Noah. How do you have verse 20?
Noah, the tiller of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard.
Okay, yeah, it says here that man of the soil, a tiller of the soil, he planted a vineyard. Okay, and it says that these are the three sons, and from that, all of humanity was born, descended. Okay, so what's the function or purpose of this story, and what does the tone and structure of this, again, what you just read, 8:18 to 9:19, and this, the tone and the structure of this address from God convey to you? Okay, what's the impression? Okay, just when you read especially the speech from God, again from 9:9 to 9:17. Yeah, 9:9 to 9:17.
Guess there's no more anger and perhaps even regret that he did.
Yeah.
He took it too far with the flood.
Yeah. It's very tender. He's very tender with these people. It's sweet and reassuring and supportive, and God is telling them and retelling them, I'm with you. I've got your back. Okay. Now, when you read again, especially the speech, God's speech, what conveys this? Look, you obviously got this impression. Okay, supportive, and what gave you this? What gives any reader this impression?
God is giving he's blessing them with offspring to multiply. There's a covenant, an agreement between me and you, which what just happened with this flood's never going to happen again. And giving them dominion over all the rest of the earth, other than.
Yeah, no, but again, this I'm with you. I'm with you. I support you. Don't worry. Like what if that's the impression? Like when you read chapter 9,
Mm-hmm.
1 through 19, and especially the speech from 9 to 17, you get this again, like you said, this tenderness, support, this tender and supportive feeling. God is supporting them. God is reassuring them. But so anyone who reads this will get the same impression. Okay, but what is the author doing to give you that impression? Like, what's the how did you get this impression of supportive, tender, reassuring? What did this for you? I'm trying to ask you what are the tricks that the author, not tricks, but the technique that the author uses to send to you this impression, to plant this impression in your mind.
There's this, it's a stark contrast to what came before when he was angry,
Right.
when he talked like in the third person that about man being wicked, and now it's directly addressed to mankind and talking about me and you, every living creature. There's God comes down to man's level, perhaps, as opposed to before he was up, looking down on wickedness of man.
Yeah, there is a lot of me and you, but you're like I and you, my covenant with you. But if you notice again, look at again in chapter 9, there's tons of repetition. Okay? For example, he tells them twice to prosper and multiply. One in verse 1, and again in verse 7. Prosper and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? He then tells them if you look at just at the speech, we're talking about what? 10 verses. In 10 verses, he tells them 7 times that he is bound to them by covenant. Okay, if you look at verse 9, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 17. Okay. Covenant, 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 covenant. Keep saying it all over again. It's kind of like, one of the complaints of the documentary hypothesis is, if you remember, I told you that this one scholar said, no good modern author would repeat himself nearly this much. This is insanely repetitive. Yeah, I'm establishing my covenant, and this rainbow in the sky is a sign of the covenant between me and you, and a covenant, and a covenant. Okay. Now, in the Hebrew original, the word, what is translated in English as covenant is brit, which is alliance. Okay, in the English, so covenant is a kind of it's a contract. Okay, it's similar, but in the Hebrew word of alliance is I think is a better translation than covenant, both because alliance is stronger than a contract, okay, but also because we all understand. Every English speaker knows what an alliance is. Okay, whereas covenant is a word that most of us have to look up in the dictionary. It's not a current word. Okay, and even if it were current, alliance is a stronger word, and it's a more literal translation of the Hebrew. So God is telling Noah's family, prosper, multiply, fill the earth, rule the earth. I'm with you. I'm your ally. 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 7 times. Okay, and I don't need to tell you that the number 7 is kind of a significant number, kind of a whole a number that represents completion in the Bible or in Judaism. So that's how you got this impression about God is very tender, very supportive of this family. Okay, because you're bombarded with this, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. I'm your ally. So why is this? Why is the author designing the text to transmit this so overtly, to present God to us as tender and overtly supportive of us?
Could it be because God is just in the previous story wiped out everyone?
Right. I mean, this was a major trauma. And again, forget about us for a second. Just think about the characters in the story. If you think of that family, what they saw and what they went through, if you really just kind of take a few minutes and try to imagine it, again, think of what people in Europe went through during World War II. That was nothing compared to this. This family was the only family left on Earth. And not only did all of humanity die off, all living creatures died, except for the fish, I guess. Okay, so these people, this small family, came out of the ark to a completely barren and silent world. Okay, there's nothing living anywhere. Again, if you kind of try to imagine some sort of post-war battle site where everyone's dead, death and destruction, but you know that there's life beyond this horrible battle site, battlefield. Sorry. Okay, so everything and everyone was dead. The earth was barren. There's literally nothing. They were all alone in the world. I guess it's like being shipwrecked on a desert island, only knowing for sure that you cannot be rescued. There's no one out there that can come and find you and save you. Okay, so again, if you imagine that family, what do you think they're going through? What do you think is going through their minds as they step out of the ark?
I don't know if they're terrified or if they're just.
I mean, let's put you on the desert on that desert island, and again, if you were on a desert island, but you know that there's been a nuclear holocaust in all the world, like you're the last man on Earth, or your family is the only one there, okay, and you know for sure that that's it. There's other than this one island on Earth, there's nothing else. What would be going through your mind now? What would you? Yeah, what do you think?
Be very lonely or very isolated or a little devastated.
Yeah, and how about the future? Like,
it would look pretty bleak. I mean, I don't.
Exactly. Like, of course you think we'll never make it. Yeah, there's no chance to do it alone. Like, there's nothing. Like, there's literally nothing. It's a barren earth with nothing on it. No plants, no nothing. Okay, so of course you'll think that not only, well, because you think that we'll never make it, we'll die. The consequence or implication of this belief is, what's the point of trying? Okay? What's the point of working and struggling and trying to create agriculture or building a hut or struggling and suffering to bring children into the world, when in a generation or two, first of all, we won't survive. But even if we did somehow manage to bring children into the world and they survive this in this really hostile environment, what's the point when in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 generations this same thing could happen to them? I mean, this God he's crazy. Okay? He's insane. Look at what he just did. Why bring children to live under the threat of total annihilation? Okay? Why do the long, tedious, hard work of creating a civilization if this is what will come of it? If God will again set nature against us to destroy us next time we screw up. Okay, so if you remove us, the readers, and just think of the story as a story, just within the story itself, these people are shaken. Again, think of these post-World War II refugees or island shipwrecked people. Their world is destroyed. Their past has been erased. Their future, as you say, is bleak. This is, God has literally destroyed their world, and God apparently, from the tone of his speech to Noah, God senses that they need reassurance and support and tenderness and this kind of care, and like you said, he humbles himself before them. Okay, do you say he brings himself to their level, or I forget how you say it?
Yeah, brings himself down.
Yeah. He brings himself down before them. He initiates the alliance with them. He makes the promise to them. He blesses them. He provides them with food. He assures them their mastery over the earth and over the animals. And more important, when we shift our attention from this mythic family on the page to the real families who were reading this text, or reading or hearing this text, okay, the people for whom this book was written, this is obviously, Noah is long dead. Okay, this book was written in around 1000 BC, roughly. So the speech that is delivered to Noah's family is delivered to the audience. Okay? Why is it important for the author to convey this tender, warm, caring message to us, to these ancient Israelites?
So that they won't fear that another flood's coming, that the biblical God is going to wipe out their civilization.
Yeah, but look, they've never experienced the flood. Never in living memory have they experienced the flood. Okay, so it's not like the flood. For Noah's family,
it was immediate.
They witnessed the flood. They went through it, and so naturally, it's this kind of question: why bother? Why struggle? Why work? If it, why build a family? If God, this crazy God, kills them, it's a strong disincentive to do anything. Okay, but that is not the reality of these Judeans in 1900, whenever BC. Okay, they didn't go through a flood. They didn't see it. They just read about it on the pages here. But why is it important for the author to give this kind of supportive, tender message from God to these people? Like, why do they need the same message as this shipwrecked family?
Wouldn't this be this would be post-exile, or like?
Yeah, so let's not get. There are a lot of theories about when this text was written. Okay, that it was after some argue that it was only after the Babylonian exile. But even if that is the case, these are clearly older traditions that were, according to this argument, written down after the exile. But there are other scholars who point out that this was written, that the older books of the Torah were written either at the time of King David or King Solomon, or even beforehand, around the 12th or maybe even 12th century, or even before. So we don't know. But even according to the most modern, the theory that has the book written in the post-exile period, these were stories that were clearly told beforehand. Okay, so let's assume that we're talking about roughly the Davidian era. Okay, so
that there's still an ongoing covenant between these people and the biblical God. That there's still
So why is it important to send this message to these people? Like, why does the author? We understand why God wants to send this message, this supportive message, to Noah's family. Because they are living in, they've been dropped into this crisis point, into a depleted planet, completely empty, completely dangerous to human life. Okay? Strong scarcity. Okay? Why is it important for the author to convey the same message, the same divine message, to Israelites?
the anticipating future scarcity. I mean, it wouldn't be on the level of this. The Noah
No. So, certainly not on this level. But you're right. Look, they're experiencing scarcity. Okay, these people too are living on the edge of destruction, at the mercy of nature. They're living. Look, the Israelites were agricultural people, living by the sweat of their brow, in a land that is definitely not fertile. Okay? This is not Egypt with its endless supply of water, or Mesopotamia with its endless supply of water. Okay? By the way, it's no coincidence that the great empires of that era were centered either in Egypt or in Mesopotamia. Because that's the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Parthians. They all come from, again, fertile areas produce wealth, and wealth produces everything else. But in any case, unlike these powers in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, the Israelites lived in a poor region. And even in that poor land, the land of Canaan, the Israelites occupied the parts that were less fertile. Okay, the strong peoples of Canaan lived along the coast, whereas the Israelites were in what we call today Judea and Samaria. Okay, so the hills at the edge of the desert, and the hill country of Samaria near to the south of the Galilee. Okay, so even in Canaan, this is the least fertile area. Okay, so and they came from even farther south, from the desert, from the Negev desert, to the south of Canaan. Okay, so the point is that unlike the people of Egypt and Mesopotamia, Israelites lived at the mercy of the weather and on the verge of economic destruction by either flood or drought, usually drought. Okay, and there's tons of, you see repeatedly in the Bible, the Israelites going to Egypt because of a drought. Abraham, Jacob, etc. So when we discussed the second creation story and how the Torah goes out of its way to tell Israelites that they're not animals, I told you at the time that the idea that humans are a kind of animal is not a modern idea that Darwin gave us. Okay, it's probably the oldest idea in human history. Okay? And that religion and civilization represent an effort to combat the idea that we're a kind of animal. The same, you can see the same when we discussed Cain. Okay? Theodicy is, the perception of injustice in the world. The problem of having a good God and evil in the world. Go ahead. I
Sorry about that.
Sure thing. So the idea that we're a kind of animal is a very old idea, and religion is a way to is an effort, represents an effort. Civilization and religion are an effort to combat this idea. The problem of theodicy, again, is not a new problem, but a problem as old as time. And again, different religions offer different explanations for injustice, as we discussed. We discussed this. And here, the same goes for the idea of human extinction. Again, this is not a new fear brought to us by Al Gore, okay, global warming, etc. The fear of nature wiping us off the face of the earth is a very old idea rooted in our prehistory. Okay, we discussed why it's important for the Torah's author to convince us that we're not animals, and why it's important for the Torah to address our frustration, Cain's frustration, Job's frustration with injustice in the world. Okay? And here, the Torah is addressing our fear of extinction. Okay, so why is it important to, again, we understand why it's important to tell us that we're not animals. Okay, without that, there can be no civilization. The same thing. The same thing. We understand why it's important, especially for a religious text, to explain theodicy to us or to address it. Why is it important for the Torah to convince us that we will not be wiped out?
Is it again hard to build a civilization if it's just going to be wiped out tomorrow?
Right. I mean, a society that doesn't trust in a good future will not last more than a generation. Okay? Because nobody will build, nobody will save, nobody will invest, nobody will educate the young. All the tedious things in life will not be done. Okay? The motto of a society that believes that it has no future is eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we'll die. Okay, so people who believe that we don't have a future on this earth, look, you hear it all the time, from prophets of doom about whatever. They don't have families, and they say it. Why would I want to bring children into a world like this? Whether it's people who took that message from World War II, or people who take this message from global warming, or whatever else. Okay. So these desert people, these ancient Israelites, have a book that tells them, with the Noah story, that God is with them. God supports them. God will provide for them. Again, read Genesis 8:20. 8, 20, yeah, 20, 22.
I have so long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Yeah. Okay. So God is reassuring them that this kind of destruction will not happen. You will not be wiped out. There will be no extinction. God will provide for them seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall never cease. There won't be a repeat of this kind of catastrophe. God will not set nature to destroy humanity ever again. Okay? So you, the audience, don't say you're living in a very harsh environment. Okay? Don't get this seed of nihilism. Don't let it. Don't lose faith in the future and become nihilistic. Okay? Don't say what's the point. Don't think that there's no future. Don't believe that the world will end. Okay? Work, prosper, multiply, invest in the future, because there will be a future. Okay? This is God's promise that there will be a future. Okay? This sweet and tender section in the Noah story tells the Israelites of 1000 BC, just before, just after, again, living in a very harsh place environmentally, and an even harsher place geopolitically and militarily. Again, they're constantly being oppressed, killed, taken to war, and then being kicked around. So it tells these Israelites that while there will be torrential rains and droughts and floods and fires and ice ages and global warmings and global coolings and earthquakes and hurricanes and attacks by neighbors, etc., but God gave you His word that the world will not end. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, and summer and winter, day and night, forever. Okay? And God gave you His word, and again, 7 times. 7 times God told you that this is an alliance and that He will not allow this to happen ever again. Okay? So I think what you have here in these 3 stories, the first 3 stories of the Bible, of the Torah, the story of creation, the story of Cain, and the story of Noah, they cover the 3 pillars of any civilization. Okay, this is not simply the introduction, the storytelling introduction of this is where humanity came from. Okay, it covers these 3 existential issues for any civilization, and that is that we are not animals. We understand or an explanation for injustice in the world. Again, getting a sense that the world isn't just this random, meaningless place. There is some sort of divine order, divine justice here. Okay, so we're not animals, explaining injustice in the world, and there is a future. Okay, these are pretty heady philosophical messages, and the biblical author communicates them to an audience of country bumpkins. Okay, these are illiterate goat herders. Okay, and the author engages them with this kind of philosophical, pretty deep philosophical lesson, not with a philosophy lecture, but really with pretty simple storytelling, and in very short stories too. Okay, so if we started our discussion with how should we treat this? Should we read the Bible from above as we do children's stories, or should we read it respectfully like high literature? It seems to me that this is as high literature as it gets. The ability to address these things that our best philosophers deal with, and making it relatable. Look, you and I are not philosophers, okay? And if we can read these stories and see the patterns, see that this is the same language as here, these two are connected, and that these are the differences, that God changes the laws, then they could too around the fire, the campfire. That's a pretty impressive accomplishment for an ancient author, and I think it speaks. Well, you know my biases, but I think that when people armed with biblical criticism treat this text as just kind of this stitched together creation, that this is kind of shoddy editorial work, and I just don't see how they can miss the patterns. Again, the 7 times, the 7 repetitions, and the similar language. This is, well, I'm just repeating myself. I think these quote-unquote problems in the text are much more easily explained as great literature than as shoddy editorial work or sloppy editorial work. So how about you were asking about the drunken scene at the end. Like, what do you make of it? Of Noah and his sons?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like Shem gets punished pretty good. I'm sorry.
Not Shem.
Ham. Yeah, Ham gets punished pretty good, and Canaan.
Right.
And then there's this trying to piece together the covering and uncovering of Noah. So I've heard lots of different theories about this, and I don't quite know. But there's that line in Deuteronomy when someone uncovers their, I think it's uncle. It's by taking children away, by having children with their uncle's wife, their aunt. And I tried to figure out how that might relate here, but it was difficult.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, but look, it's clearly there are 2 obvious lessons from this story. Number 1 is about honoring your parents, honoring your father and mother. This is kind of a story of good sons who get rewarded, and a bad son who does not, for dishonoring the father. But the other, and the one that seems more a more useful one to me, or more plausible one to me, is that, look, when you look at genealogies in the Bible, we'll talk about some more. We're not going to read the genealogies because they're kind of boring, but they're actually very important. And they're important because they tell the readers about their connection to people around them. There are genealogies of Israel and genealogies of the peoples around Israel. the Canaanites, the Ammonites, the Amorites, the Edomites, Moabites, Egyptians, etc., etc. And so the family tree that these boring genealogies draw for you tell the Israelites about their connections to other Israelite groups and to non-Israelite groups. Okay, it clarifies to them the nature of the relationship. And here, it seems to me that the important part of this story is not the drunkenness and the kind of the detail of his nakedness and everything else, but Canaan. Okay, so if we're at the time of, let's say, the Judges, or the time of Joshua, or the time of King David, if you're trying to understand the difference between us and the Canaanites, okay, and why the Canaanites are inherently what they are, okay, and why they deserve their fate that God told us to inflict upon them. Okay. These genealogies tell you the story. Look, when the Israelites come into the land of Israel, God tells them in Moses' farewell speech, do not enter and do not harass the Moabites or the Ammonites, yeah, because they are the descendants of Esau or Lot or whoever. Okay? Okay? These are your family. Okay? And this is their land. I gave them this land. They're your family. They're not your enemies. I mean, they might be enemies, but they're not your mortal enemies. The Canaanites are mortal enemies, and therefore, God is sending the Israelites to take their land and kill them and everything else. Okay? So I think stories like this clarify that this is the design. That there is that the Canaanites are inherently wicked, inherently evil, and deserving of their fate. It's not, and it didn't just again. So these genealogies kind of make order of the geopolitical world, both outside of Israel and inside the Israelite nation itself. Again, because a lot of the genealogies are of Israelite families. So they show the connection, your connection to other Israelite families, and your separateness from non-Israelite families, and your definite separateness and enmity to Canaan. So it seems to me that to me that's to me that's the function of this story.
Well, is there anything particular about the Canaanites that makes them particularly unsuitable? Like, as opposed to, like, I know you have the Canaanites, you have the Philistines, you have the Babylonians to the north. They all seem to be, I guess the Babylonians a little less than the Canaanites and the Philistines, but they're not family, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
And they all have different characters, it seems.
Yeah, but again, the God designated the land of Canaan to be the land of Israel. Okay? And it has clear borders. God draws, it's actually an innovation. Like the idea of a bordered land is an innovation of, as far as I read. I read somebody's commentary on it, that the Bible is an oddly nationalist book in an era that we're told is pre-nationalist. Okay? And part of it is the idea of a land that belongs to a people. Because the normal understanding of a state is, as far as your armies can conquer, that is what you should or can hold. Okay? But when the Israelites are led by Moses or by Joshua into the land, God tells them, regardless of their power, they are not allowed to conquer territories beyond the borders that He paints for them. So clearly, there's God has a plan to replace the Canaanites with Israelites, but not other peoples in east of the Jordan River or south, Egypt or Babylonia or the Hittites. That is beyond the pale for the Israelites. So there's something about the Canaanites that apparently is uniquely, they've done something that requires or justifies to God this displacement and destruction and death at the hands of the Israelites. Okay? So I think a story like this, like genealogies in general, sets up the relationships and explains these genealogies are the origin stories of relationships between groups in the present. Both relationships between Israelite tribes, who the genealogies tell them, you're brothers, and relationships with other peoples, who tells them, you're cousins, and relationships with Canaanites, whom it tells, the Israelites are told, you're mortal enemies. Yeah, so I think the drunkenness is a vehicle to deliver this part of the story. That to me is the important part of the story for the storyteller.
It's a weird, if it's to justify I don't know if justify is the right word, the different treatment of Canaanites, why it's a strange story to.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. But I think it's a kind of genealogy. Well, it is a genealogy with a character description, character study of the two good brothers and the evil brother. And from these two good brothers, these are the peoples that came from them, and from this bad brother, this scum developed. And here we are, 1,000, 2,000, however many years later. So again, I think you're right. I wouldn't call it to justify, but I think it establishes the relationship of enmity and disgust or lack of, enmity, okay, moral enmity and political enmity. Okay, it establishes that you have nothing in common with these people. You're enemies from long before. Because look, if every national group needs to have a sense of who we are and who we are not, who we are against, who are our the not the mirror image, but the negative. Okay? We're not like them. Okay, so I think the Canaanites are a kind of type of the kind of people we're not. And look, a lot of the Israelite religion is a lot of the halakha, the rules that are given to the Israelites are obvious negations of of Canaanite practices. Okay, and God at some point even points out that He is trying to separate them from the peoples of the land, meaning the land of Canaan. Okay, so I think this is this is kind of an early part of the genealogies that explain, of the stories that explain who you are by also explaining who you're not, who you're unlike.
Makes sense. Yeah. But it's so hidden that it's hard to get real enmity from this story. Whereas, and it comes out, I guess, later on, but
well, it's not that hidden. It says that he is a, where is it? look, if I tell you, look, think of the Hatfields and the McCoy. Hatfields and the McCoys?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, look, the Israelites were living in enmity with the Canaanites. Okay?
Mhm.
When you are in a feud like this, in a blood feud with the McCoys, there are stories that we, the Hatfields, tell ourselves about the Grandpa McCoy or the great grandfather and what he did to us. Look, the Iranians today are still telling themselves the story of what the Arabs did to them in the year, like, I don't know, 800 or something, about how they enslaved them and what they did to their women and everything else. It's in the midst of an enmity, the history is used to demonstrate that there's a reason, that there's a continuous hostility or evilness or corruption or whatever on the other side that explains this enmity that we are living through today.
The weird part about this story is I just don't like. It's God who puts the enmity. Like, it doesn't seem like Ham does anything to his brothers that would justify them treating him differently, or like that would give that same kind of Hatfield and McCoy. Like, hey, we talked about. Remember when we go way back and you guys came against us, or you guys did something wrong to us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did this to our father.
But it's still extremely unclear as to what he did to their father, other than see him naked.
That is true.
Failed to cover it.
Yeah. Look, we don't know what exactly he did, but we know that he dishonored him. Okay, he dishonored the father. And again, remember that this is a much more it's a society that venerates the father much more than we do. Look, but the important thing is that this person, this brother, is the bad brother. Okay, and he has earned divine punishment for eternity. Okay, that Cain will be a slave to his brothers. Not Cain, sorry, Canaan. And again, Canaan is not a character. He's a patriarch. Okay, Canaan, the people, shall be slaves to his to their brothers, to the other peoples, to the descendants of Shem and Yefet. So I again, you're right that it's a weird story, but I think, I mean, it's not I think, it's obvious that there's that the author is trying to place the Canaanites in this pre-history of humanity in order to say something relevant to Israelites living today at 1000 BC or whenever we're talking about. Okay? So I think it's part of this establishing and I don't know if I don't know if justifying is the word, but pointing out that this rivalry is a duty. You know, it's not just an earthly conflict between these people and those people. It's a divine duty from time immemorial to punish the wicked brother, to this wicked part of humanity. Okay, so, and again, I think if you think of Hatfields and McCoys, or any kind of, the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland, telling stories about what his great-great-grandfather did to your great-great-great-grandmother is an important building block in sustaining the enmity and explaining why you're doing this, why this fight is taking place, why we are not friends with those people. And again, I think the Iranians and the Arabs is a good example. Okay, there's this this sense of being wronged that they did not experience. Iranians today did not experience it, but they sustain the insult from generations ago through these keeping the memories alive.
Still don't understand that Ham, like that. What's going on there? It's very strange.
It is strange, but look, what is not strange
Is that the Canaanites later are?
Look, it doesn't say Yefet is the father of whomever, Shem is the father of whomever. It's important for him to say in verse 18, Ham, the father of Canaan. Okay? And the curse goes and again, and Ham saw and he saw Ham, the father of Canaan. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the privates of his father, etc., etc. And he kind of joked about it. He told his brother, like basically, he had no sense of respect, no sense of shame. But it's important. So every time it says Ham, the father of Canaan, Ham, the father of Canaan, and Canaan bears the punishment. Okay? So look, I'm with you that the story is strange, but look, actually, the story isn't. If this story were not about uncovering the father's privates, but was instead about Ham raping his mother, okay, something horrible, etc., etc., it wouldn't be as strange to you. The function that I described wouldn't be as strange to you because it will tell the audience today, the Canaanites are the descendants of rapists.
This terrible.
They're terrible people. They're terrible people by nature. Okay, so I suspect that uncovering the father's privates is
something along those lines.
Laundered language of something much worse. Okay, so again, these Canaanites and their horrible practices, their terrible religious practices, etc., etc., these people are in their blood. They're rapists, man on man, son of father, just terrible people. In their origin, in their prehistory, let alone what they did to your fathers and grandfathers in the last war, and what they did to your fields and everything else. So this is, again, Hatfields and McCoys. This is not from today.
And it would seem that if the whatever the act was resulted in Canaan being born, in that whole line of, it seems like it would be more.
Yeah. Look, it doesn't say. It doesn't say. We don't know. Okay, but it's important. Look, the question is, to me, why not just name Ham Canaan? Why not have the three brothers be Canaan, Yefet, and Shem? Okay, it's kind of it's an odd thing that Ham is the sinner, but Canaan gets the punishment. But
all of his offspring.
Yeah. Look, it's important to have the name Canaan as coming from the seed of evil people, or that they are the seed of evil people. And here, look around you. Look at their monstrous ways. Okay, but it shows you that it's in their blood. There's no redemption for them. There's no, not redemption, but there's no. It's like the leopard can't change his spots. Okay, this is who they are. This is who they've always been. They're monstrous people, and they don't deserve your sympathy. They deserve your enmity. Okay, they've earned their punishment justly because this is who they are, and they've always been this. Okay, so again, I think the Hatfields and McCoys, the Iranians and the Arabs and the Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. You need these stories in order to clarify the boundaries between us and them. Okay? Why not marry them? Like that beautiful girl across the street. You cannot marry her because of the stock that she comes from. Those are not good people. She might look hot. They're not good people. You don't want that. You should be disgusted by her, not attracted to her. Your neighbor who seems nice, no.
And it has to be that way for the Canaanites because they're going to take that land, as opposed, and it's different with the Philistines than the Babylonians.
Yeah, no, look, the Philistines, and look, the Philistia is not part of
Land.
of the land, yeah, of the land that they're. I mean, actually, maybe the land is painted differently in different verses, but it doesn't seem to be. Actually, no, because none of the tribes. Okay, the tribe of Dan. Part of its promised territory included parts of where the Philistines were, but all the rest, you know, the Israelites and the Philistines, their territories, again, other than the tribe of Dan, were side by side rather than overlapping. Whereas with the Canaanites, it's overlapping. Yeah, yeah, and look, and in the Philistines, there's no mandate to destroy the Philistines and wipe them out, as there is for the Canaanites. It's only the Canaanites.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks again for everything. The next week, 11 through 24.
Yeah, I'll send you the email. Yeah, with the,
Okay,
with
sounds
the
good.
verses too. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks again. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you very much. Bye bye.